Hello everyone, my name is Adrian Markish and I'm the publisher and editor of ModernAnalyst.com, the premier online community for business analysts. I would like to welcome you to today's webinar titled How the Business Analyst Can Keep Up with the Demand for Data. Today's featured speaker is Amit Parikh, Manager of Systems Consultants for Quest Software. The webinar would last approximately 60 minutes including a Q&A session. So make sure to submit your questions in advance using the questions feature of the webinar software. I would like to say thank you to Quest Software for sponsoring this event. At this time, I will turn over to Amit to get us started.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Good morning, good afternoon, and perhaps even good evening wherever you guys have dialed and logged in from. My name is Amit Parikh. I'm with Quest Software, and thanks again for your time and attention today. I also want to say a special thanks to Modern Analyst for providing us this platform to deliver this presentation, which again is titled, Keep Up with the Demand for Data, Solutions for the Busy Business Analyst. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next slide. This is a little bit about me. I've been with Quest since 1999. In fact, Quest became a public company back at that same time frame. And I've been primarily working in the area of applications and database management product areas. And I would also say that I have over a decade of experience with databases or database-related technologies. Currently, I'm the manager of systems consulting for database solutions based out of North America, here in our North American headquarters in Aliso Viejo. And the bottom paragraph just basically gives you an idea of where my interests are outside of my daily work. You know, I've been doing a lot of speaking over the years. I guess the last major event I spoke at was the Oracle Develop Conference in Bangalore, India, back in 2007. But a lot of local user groups, a lot of independent user groups, you know, throughout the nation, throughout the world. It gives me a chance to speak, you know, to folks, end users such as yourselves, you know, business professionals, technology professionals, you name it. So again, that gives you a background about me. And if anything, it's a pleasure to speak to the business analyst community. The next slide here, I have an agenda that I'd like to cover first, and which will give you a taste for what we're going to be covering today. Let me go ahead and move to that slide. So if you're on this call, I guess it most likely means that you're feeling the strain or you're having challenges keeping up with the demand for data in your business or in your organization. The intention of this webcast is to address those pains and illustrate a better way for you to manage and access that data you need to support your projects. So here's the outline. We'll talk a little bit about the increased demand for data, the explosion of data that we're seeing here in the world, data management that occurs in your organization, the challenges to meeting that demand, whether it's access to data, understanding relationships, writing efficient queries, and then we'll actually take a look a little bit deeper into a business analyst's use case. We actually have patterned this off of an individual here at Quest Software, and what we'll talk about are some of the ways, you know, right tools, if you have the right tool in place, how it can solve pains and those challenges that we mentioned above here in this agenda. So again, we'll take a look at a business analyst use case. We'll follow that up with some Q&A, and this will give you guys a chance to submit some questions. I will see if I can answer them. And if anything, if you guys would like to have a closer look at you know, what we've illustrated in this presentation, we could always come back to some of those topics as well. But we will definitely have a Q&A session for you folks. So let's go ahead and proceed. As you know, from your own experiences in your own business, in your own organizations, the demand that business has for data has grown exponentially over the last few years. In fact, here are some figures that Forrester has put together this last year. 50% annual growth is reported in your online transactional data and repositories. 27% of enterprise surveyed have 50 or more terabyte production databases. 64% of enterprises surveyed have over half of their databases on costly, you know, tier 1 storage, and 20% of data center infrastructure is spent to support data growth. So this, in short, will illustrate that data explosion, and as a result, in this boom in data, and you're seeing new technologies, you know, come about, whether it's business intelligence platforms, analytics solutions, you know, applications or solutions that tie to a data warehouse. They've all become standard or de facto standards for, you know, our users to get a front-end view and give them sort of the ability to work with the data that they need. However, business analysts like you sometimes need to access data directly at the source, whether it's to deliver ad hoc reports or to support the objectives that your business has. You may be trying to deliver on requirements. So regardless of the reason why you need to access and verify this raw data, we've discovered that the pains you feel are fairly uniform across the analyst community. It seems basic, but supporting your business by producing reports, supporting requirements, or translating those requirements to IT starts with raw data. And the ability to access, gather, mine, and investigate that data. But as you know, these are challenging. These are challenging tasks. This is where some obstacles can come in. This is where some hindrances can come in. So how can you move past those challenges? Most of the business analysts we speak to have common challenges when it comes to gathering and investigating the data they need to support their projects or requirements. The first, and I would think the most common hurdle, is having to rely on someone else. Someone in IT, perhaps a database administrator or a database specialist. They'll run the queries for you and deliver your data. Obviously, this can cause some bottlenecks and delays in getting the data that you need. It can be challenging if you need to spend multiple cycles with this person in IT to get the right data from this source. But if you do have direct access to data, then you may be dealing with the challenge of gathering data from multiple sources. Viewing and understanding data can pose unique challenges. For instance, if you're fulfilling business requirements or gathering data for ad hoc reporting purposes, where do you begin to find the right data? Where do you start? If you need to pull related data sets, how easy it is to find the connection or the relationship between these sets. Typically, it's not that easy, especially if you're working solely out of tools like Microsoft Excel or Microsoft Access. Again, you could be great at your job. You could be very superior in those particular tasks that we just mentioned. You could be an expert in the area of your business, but you still may feel the negative effects of these roadblocks to getting the data that you need to meet the demand that your business places on you. It's not your fault that accessing and managing data in your organization has resulted in the challenges we've mentioned on the previous slide, but unfortunately, the side effects can still be the same. Missed deadlines, late deliverables, working with inaccurate data, and so on. Since we covered the areas of pain that many business analysts faced, maybe some that you're familiar with, I guess at this point I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into an actual use case. In this use case, we're going to be looking at a situation in one of Quest Software's own business analysts. This person is aligned to our marketing department, and his responsibilities include improving business processes, gathering and delivering against business requirements to the IT organization based on his findings, and delivering ad hoc reports to various stakeholders throughout the organization. So while I go into detail about his responsibilities and pains, I will speak to how he's able to work much more efficiently using the right tools, specifically Quest Software's Toad for Data Analyst solution. So this is where we're going to go into an actual business use case or a business analyst use case. Let me move to the next slide here. So as you can see here, the first pain that the business analyst will have to deal with is accessing his data. As we covered earlier in this presentation, accessing the data he needs to support his projects it can be a challenge. In this particular case, he needs to request data from one of his DBAs who manages the data stored on both SQL Server and Oracle. And once he has the data he needs, our business analyst then uses Access to create his own database or own tables of information, and will use Excel to format and compare those data sets. Beyond the pain of relying on the DBA to provide this information, the analyst also faces the pain of manually managing this data and these data sets. He could spend several hours a week manually merging data into Excel and attempting to create meaningful result sets from the data that he's working with. Toad for Data Analyst addresses this challenge of data access in a couple of ways. Let me go ahead and illustrate that to you guys. The first, and I would say the foremost, is that our business analyst can install the tool in read-only mode. This gives the database administrator and the IT organization peace of mind. That production database will not be compromised. It won't be violated. It won't be affected in any uncertain way. It also frees the database administrator from having to pool the data for the business analyst. Since the DBA has enough to do, this removes that particular bottleneck from the equation, as they say. Secondly, TDA, or the acronym for Toad for Data Analyst, enables our business analyst to have direct access to the data on multiple sources, database platforms, or data sources where he may have permissions. There's a quick start guide at the beginning of the program which directs him to the connection screen. And this is where he could easily see his connections and select the source he wants to connect to. And as you can see here, he would have access to multiple data sources, including the Oracle and SQL Server databases that house the data he needs to work with, he finds relevant to his project or requirement. So the next step for our business analyst is solving this second pain, or this is the next pain in this workflow, and that is viewing and understanding the data. Once he's connected to his data sources, having the ability to view and understand the data he needs to work with, I think, is vitally important. Currently, he receives the data from the DBA based on the query for a particular data set or sets, and then has to manually work with this data in Excel or Access to view, merge, and even compare to understand the data relationships. A tool that would enable him to see where the needed data resides, understand these data relationships, and view and compare this data in real time could save him a significant amount of time in his project. So that's the real pain there, is the time that our analysts take in viewing and understanding data. Well, in the next slide, you're going to see how TDA, or Code for Data Analyst, helps with these particular tasks. You'll see after setting up his connections, as we've just covered, he will now have access to TDA's ER diagram and database browser features. On this slide, you could actually see an example of the ER diagram where the orders on the contact table are joined together, or perhaps have a relationship in the database that already exists. This is a much easier, much more straightforward way to view and understand the data this analyst needs to work with, as opposed to having to manually sort or view the data he receives from IT. This feature also helps the business analyst connect the dots, so to speak, with the data, giving him the power to see where the data is located and how data is related, or how data could be related. According to some recent customer feedback, many common data professional tasks, such as comparing and syncing data, could take several hours a week. In fact, it could take up to 10 hours per week. These are tasks that are often very manual and require multiple steps to complete. Here you can see how TDA's, or Toad for Data Analyst, data compare feature is built directly into the solution. This will help shave off a lot of manual work, an hour spent in manual work from the business analyst, and again, allow them to work in a much more streamlined and efficient way when it comes to doing this type of task, again, compare and perhaps seeing differences in records. And additionally, he could create pivots, pivot tables, charts directly from this tool, which can help him even be more efficient. So let's now move on to pain number 3, which is another one of the more challenging things that the analyst will have to deal with, and that is writing the SQL. So after our business analyst has tackled the first two pains, which is accessing the data and viewing and understanding the data he needs to work with, there is that one last challenge, and that's actually writing the SQL to query the data that he needs. The analyst knows where it is, knows the tables and rows of data he wants to return, but can he write the efficient and correct query to return that data quickly and easily? Some of you on this call may be expert SQL writers, SQL scripters. We know that some of you may come from an IT background, or perhaps have learned the art of SQL development over the past few years or over time. Some of you, however, may be new to the concept of writing queries or new to SQL, especially if you've relied on other departments like IT to deliver your data. And there's even a bigger challenge. What if you want to collect data from more than one source? Some of the business analysts we've talked to have to write and execute 2 or more separate queries, then collect the data, then manually join the results into one spreadsheet. And even bigger, a much more bigger challenge than that, what if your data is on different platforms? Separate databases, but separate types of databases. As you recall, our business analyst needs data from both Oracle and SQL Server, and he stores additional data on his own Access database. So when we developed Toad for Data Analyst, we took all of these issues into consideration. We wanted to create a tool that was accessible to both the casual and inexperienced SQL writer, and for those that are more experienced. We also wanted to make it easy for analysts who need to query data from multiple sources and database platforms that are different. We just wanted to allow you to move across that challenge much more swiftly. So let's walk through how our business analyst would overcome these challenges we've just talked about with Toad for Data Analyst. As we covered before, he can set up his own connections. In this case, it would be to Oracle, SQL Server, and Access, and then browse those databases to view the data he needs. The ER diagrammer and the database browser features we covered are located in the query portion of the tool's workflow. This enables him to easily view and select data he wants to query from one pane in the tool, and perhaps work with other panes as well. And by being able to by being able to, view and connect that data and perhaps even save that query for future rebuilds or perhaps for future adjustments, and visually build that query, in fact, in real time, this allows both professional level and inexperienced level SQL writers to save a lot more time on working on much more complex queries. So TDA automatically builds the query based off of the data you select with the Visual Query Builder. As you can see here, both of these objects have been loaded into the screen. Selections on what you want to query out, what type of criteria you want to make to filter down the data will ultimately reflect itself into an SQL statement. And if you're a more advanced SQL writer, someone that's really comfortable with working in a script mode, or you need to view the SQL statement that was created by the query builder itself, or the Visual Query Builder, you could use Toad for Data Analyst's SQL Editor, which is equipped with a lot of productivity adds, like syntax highlighting and the ability to do code folding, and the ability to, perhaps even format the statement that you're building as well, above and beyond just the SQL development. And if you're working with data from different sources or disparate platforms, just like our analyst, here's where Toad for Data Analyst really provides value. By connecting to and selecting the data you need from different sources, even if the data is on a different platform, like Oracle and SQL Server, you can create one query that will join the data from these sources. As you can see in the background, the orders table is coming from Access, and the contact table is coming from a different database altogether, Oracle. So you can see that the join was constructed between the contact IDs and looking for equivalent contact IDs. This is a heterogeneous query. This is a cross-platform query. This is a capability that TDA provides you, to join the data from these multiple sources. We've actually tested this on over 7 different sources at once. Toad for Data Analyst supports all major RDBMS platforms, as well as things like Excel and Access, or any other database through ODBC. There are other databases out there that are outside of the mainstream that we still offer ODBC support to. So you can still use open database connectivity to get to those. And lastly, there is one additional pain, and that's the pain of creating reports and delivering these reports to our stakeholders. Ad hoc reports are something stakeholders usually need pretty quickly. But putting them together can be time-consuming. In our business analyst case, he will manually export the data, typically through a cut-and-paste action, into Microsoft Excel. Then he'll need to format the data in a meaningful way, build out the report for the stakeholders, and then the formatting and the report creation can take the valuable time away from other tasks he may need to complete. And furthermore, he had no way to automate or even save that data-driven process, like the queries and perhaps even the technique that he used for report distribution. So more often than not, he would need to start from scratch with each report project. He may not be able to completely pick up from where he last started, or last ended off, rather. With Toad for Data Analysts, our business analyst can export his results to Excel with one click. Remember, the ability to run a query that gathers data from different sources. We talked about that, the heterogeneous query, the cross-platform query. He can now do this and export the data without any manual cut and paste into Excel. And then from there, he could easily create custom reports and work with a predefined template using TDA's report wizard, and then easily distribute these reports in the preference of his choice, whether it be a format such as PDF, HTML, or even upload the report for file sharing to an FTP server, or perhaps to a network share. I should also mention that apart from the predefined templates that are available in Toad for Data Analyst, this is a tried and true report builder as well. So if you've ever worked in Microsoft Access and you've designed a form, or if you've worked in a solution where you can design a front-end view of your data, this solution has the ability to design custom reports as well. And also, you have the ability to create many different types of Excel spreadsheets, some that stand alone, some that are linked to the database, and that will update depending on the changes that are made in the database. So there are quite a bit of powerful reporting features available to the Toad for Data Analyst user, especially the analyst. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide here. We talked about automation, and I think it's important that you could repeat your data-driven tasks. So the automation and the scheduling features available to this analyst would allow the analyst to save and schedule their queries, even the heterogeneous ones, to run at specific times. Toad for Data Analyst links to your Windows scheduler. So once you test and you actually schedule this automation script to run, it will run on the auspice of your Windows scheduler, or just as any other Windows task. This will allow you to automate and create and distribute reports to those stakeholders. As you can see over on the left-hand side, there are several different file activities you could associate with your script. So you could send an email, you could archive, you could put this on the share, and then you'll see up above there's some of the database-driven activities that may be automated as well. And finally, this is going to improve productivity by freeing up the time to work on those other tasks. So again, removing some of those bottlenecks along the way, allowing you to have to avoid having to start from scratch in this data-driven project. Let's move to our next slide. So after using Toad for Data Analysts, our business analyst is now able to tackle the challenges that were causing significant delays to his project and extra work on his part. With this tool, he can now access data directly at the source, view and understand relevant data to support requirements in projects, easily execute queries regardless of SQL knowledge, quickly produce and deliver reports. Then you could save and schedule these queries and reports for automation so you can keep that workflow for yourself or for others to benefit from and collaborate around. So after talking to business analysts such as yourself, we can understand how you may often feel like a data detective, searching for the right data in the right place while delivering on your projects quickly and efficiently. But in conclusion, it all comes down to time. Your department or organization relies on you to get the data to them to support projects. You feel this challenge every day. You may be working twice as hard as you need to in order to view, understand, and deliver upon this data. You could relieve these pains you feel, deliver data faster, and look like a superstar with the right tools to support your needs. So this is one of several webcasts that we're producing over the next coming time on tackling analyst planes with the right solutions. Before we get into the Q&A session, what I'd like to do is actually open up the tool for you guys so you guys can actually see it in live mode. It may not be so much of a demo, but we're actually just going to give you guys a closer look at the solution. And then what we'll do is we'll open up for some Q&A. We wanted to reserve enough time for any questions or concerns that you guys may have about this content. So why don't I do this? Before we get into the Q&A session, let me quickly give you guys a preview of what the solution will look like. This may even prompt more questions on your part. And this will take me about 5, maybe 10 minutes to do, and then we'll open up the Q&A session. So what I'm going to do now is flip right over into a virtual machine. So all of our solutions have been tried and tested for virtual environments, and as you can see, right up front and really in my face, we have the quick guide. This quick guide basically illustrates the workflow that TDA can take an analyst through. And what I've done is I've recreated several of the things that our analyst in our use case had performed, from understanding the data environment to building the right query to meet the requirements, to deciding on what report format we want to publish, and then ultimately deciding on whether we want to automate this data distribution or not. So I'll go ahead and close down the quick guide. And as you can see, I've staged quite a few of these windows for us. So it's not a complete demo, but it will actually give you a vignette or at least a view or a quick view into what we were talking about in the presentation. It all starts with your navigation manager, and as was illustrated into the presentation, all your multiple sources are going to be available here. So in my case, I have Oracle, Excel, and Access available to me, and I have concurrent sessions open to both Oracle and Access. So I have data in Oracle, I have data in Access, and I may even have data in Excel. And depending on which database you click on, your database objects become readily available to you. So you have a browser that's always working for you, depending on the connection and the context you've been working with. The project manager is a place where you can organize your work. So whether it's diagrams, queries, reports, or actual jobs or tasks that you want to save and redistribute, it's a very organized way, a very meaningful way of tackling your data project. So the first thing I did is click on number 1 in the workflow, and this allowed me to produce an ER diagram. This ER diagram was actually generated off of the customer's object. So this customer's object actually has relationships to other objects in the database, and by deciding on the number of relationships here with this number factor, I could actually have TDA decide how many levels of that relationship I want to load. So how many of these relationships concern me in this data project is going to be key to my query in the next step. But this is a great way for you to get an understanding of what's in your environment. As you move forward, you'll also see that step number 2 allows you to build or generate the query. What's nice about TDA is that the workflow is all over the place, whether you're up on the toolbar above or you're down below. So you'll see that you could actually send this to a query and begin building a query off of these 4 objects. But in my case, I've already staged this for us. This is where I have a query builder open. And I wanted to show you something unique that we discussed in that analyst use case. Remember, the analyst at Quest had to pull data from Oracle and SQL Server. In my case, I need to pull information from Oracle and Access. So by simply dragging and dropping the tables from the Object Explorer into the query screen, TDA recognizes that these are on different platforms and has now labeled this a heterogeneous query. My project for this particular example is a data quality project. I have account information or customer information that reside in 2 platforms. I need to resolve where our data quality initiatives reside, meaning do we have common customer IDs? That's why I create the join between both of these customer IDs. And I want to see if their names are different. So after running this query, I put the customer IDs right next to each other and the names right next to each other. And this illustrates to us that there are 5, or let's say that there are a number of customer IDs that are common between two of the tables, but they have different customer names throughout. So it's a complete initiative that we need to correct here. And this is the query that we've built. So as you move through your query building process visually, your actual SQL statement should be constructed for you. And again, this is a unique feature for TDA, the ability to join data across multiple platforms and bring that data back into a central spreadsheet or a central data grid, as they say. Moving forward, as you can see here on the toolbar below, you can now decide on what report you want to create. There are several ways to do this. You could export. You could do a quick export. This allows you to decide on what type of Excel file you want to create. Do you want it to be standalone spreadsheet? Do you want it to be linked to the database? So if changes are made to the underlying database, it will update the spreadsheet as well. Or do you want to build, your own report, your own chart, your own pivot grid, your own table browser? So as you can see here, there are many different ways you can move towards, building the design of data that you'd like. I've actually have a sample here. This is a preview of a report that comes equipped with every evaluation copy of TDA. So this is something that you can access directly from the reports manager. This is where you would also store some of your own reports that you create over time. And as I mentioned earlier, TDA works a lot like a report builder. So this is the final format of this report. The design of this report can be easily accessed. And this is where you can add new things to the report. You could explore the different parts of the report from the header down to the footer and the detail bands. You can invoke certain graphical properties to appear in the report, and you could decide on which fields do you want to appear inside of the report. You can drag and drop them to different places in the grid. So you have a reporting engine that's built in. And as you can see, once you've built your report, the last step would be to automate this, right? You now know which environment to get this from, which tables. You now know exactly what query you want to use by visually building it. You've decided on your publication. Now you want to automate those first three steps. So now you can move it into automation, and this will give you a visual workflow encapsulating everything that you've just produced. So the database connection has been embedded. We want to export this to Excel or to a graphical report, and then once it runs the SQL script and builds that fully qualified Excel file, we will then have that Excel file emailed to a distribution list or a set of constituents, or I perhaps want this to be uploaded to a shared directory or an FTP server. You could even do both of those tasks in parallel. So there's a lot of different goodies that are available here in the toolbox to the left that allow you to make this automation script more dynamic. And then you have a job management feature built in. So if I scroll down here into my job manager, this is going to show me now if I have any reports that are yet to run, that are scheduled to run. And I apologize that this task list isn't as expansive, but what it's telling you here is that I have a schedule of things on this particular server. So it taps you right into the Windows scheduling type of interface, if you will. One last thing I wanted to show you here, and then we'll open up for some Q&A, is the data compare. There will be times where you need to compare data. This is a comparison between our production copy of customers and our development copy of customers. So both of these reside on the same database instance, but you could just imagine you may want to do this across platforms. You may want to do this for two different types of table names. There's so many use cases. But as you can see here, it's identifying the different additional missing identical records. And you could do multiple objects at the same time. It doesn't have to be one table. And this will outline those differences. So it's showing us here that there are 3 customer IDs that are common, but they have some slight differences in address and in name. And you could focus on those records individually as well. So again, the time it takes to understand the environment, the time that it takes to build the query, the time that it takes to design the report, and then make that process repeatable for future use, as well as trying to delineate differences between objects. All of those things are going to be vastly improved when using a solution like this. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of the image. What I'd like to do now is open up the forum for any questions or concerns that you guys may have. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at our question and answer panel. But if you guys have any questions or comments, please do submit those so I can go through those individually. Give me 1 second while I do that. So there's one question here is, when will this be available for download or streaming? Adrian, perhaps you can answer that question for the group?
Yeah, absolutely. The both the webinar and the slides will be archived at ModernAnalyst.com within a couple of days.
Okay, thank you. Another question we have, this one is asked by Jennifer Wang. What percentage of the business analysts in general actually are able to query the database directly without the help of IT? That's interesting. You know what? I know this may sound pretty cookie cutter, but we find that up to about 50% of the analyst community has direct access needs. Now, I don't know if that's correct or not, but this is just something in my own personal experience. This is something that we have kind of touted here at Quest, but you kind of look at both sides. You have the technical-oriented business user. You have the sort of the less technical-oriented business user, so they sit on both sides of the spectrum. I think it's simply this. There are always going to be times where we need to fill in the gaps. We need to do things ad hoc. We may need to support a business decision that has not already been thought of, or perhaps we don't have the right data for. So I think there are always going to be situations where direct access is needed, again, to fill in those gaps. It's really hard to quantify, but I would say close to 50% of the folks that we talk to need some type of direct access to data, and it's mainly because of ad hoc reasons, whether it's filling in a gap or something that their business intelligence or reporting system isn't currently answering. It's a tough one to get a little bit more granular in, but I would say that I would kind of split it like that. Paula Hackinson has a question. For installation, you said to do as read-only. Shouldn't the security access be controlled at the server level? I've used Toad as a developer, and if I didn't have the create, modify, or delete access on the Unix server, I could not change, save, or delete data. To me, it gives the impression that the options selected during install determine what the user can do with TDA. Paula, I completely concur with your thought. First and foremost, all of our solutions that are in the Toad family, whether it's Toad for Data Analyst or another Toad that you may be using, will always work in conjunction with the database security and privileges. So as Paula mentioned, if you didn't have the right to create, modify, or delete records in a table or objects in the database, Toad will not allow you to do that. So it doesn't give you any Uber privileges. But on the flip side, there are times where there are certain accounts that have not been provisioned enough. There are always going to be loopholes in a database, and I think having a read-only selection helps give you an added layer of protection on top of any vulnerabilities or any loopholes that may occur in the database. And I think that's the major premise behind us having a read-only view. There are also a lot of environments that are very vast, and one user may download the tool or may given the access to it. So giving that an option also gives you extra protection. But I think it's mainly to avoid the loopholes that occur in the database. Not enough roles, not enough privileges, as they say. So I hope that answered your question, Paula. We have a question from, I'm going to say Alicia Terman. DAs are often responsible for data quality. Is there any way of automatically checking the data quality, alerts and notification, for example, putting in place some rules? There is one tool that you could use is the execution plan. And what the execution plan will do, let me actually show you what this looks like. Give me 1 second and I'll come back to the pane here. So I'm back here in our image, and let me move over to my editor. See if I can provide you with at least a little bit of insight here. Let me load a file. Bear with me while I get to this. Okay, and this button that I just clicked should now produce the execution plan for this particular query. So let me figure out exactly where it went. Must be dealing with a bug here because I'm not seeing it on my screen. Let me see if I can open up the panel some other way. Sorry, guys. Let's try this one more time. Yeah, I'm not getting the plan to open up here for whatever reason, but what it would show us is an actual tree of different events that the query took to get its data. So it will tell you that an operation was used at step number 7, that another operation was used at step number 8. So that's the only thing inside of Toad for Data Analyst that can help you understand whether you are following a proper database convention or not. It may tell you if you're reading every single record from a table. It'll tell you the type of join you've constructed. It may tell you in red that the type of join you've constructed is actually a poor practice, like a Cartesian join, where you are joining too much data between two tables. So the explain plan feature is something that will help you in terms of understanding the order of operations. But as far as getting a syntax check, as far as getting a code quality examination, unfortunately, Toad for Data Analyst doesn't really venture into that avenue. Perhaps in the future, we're going to see that come into play. But at this point, we don't really have a rules engine that you can invoke, against the queries or the code that you develop, inside of TDA. So I would say working with the explain plan is one aspect of using the solution to better understand the different operations that occurred in your query, and perhaps as a starting point into, making some adjustments. But I will definitely, duly noting some of these things, for the future. Mark Lawrence has a question. I know that Quest has released freeware in the past. Is there any freeware for this version of Toad which can allow analysts to test and try the solution? Mark, I think the best thing for you to do is just download an evaluation copy of the product. Now, it's not a freeware solution, but it will at least allow you to test and try the solution and make your own opinions about it. The other great thing about Toad for Data Analyst is that anybody that's a licensed user of Toad for Oracle, like in the past year has picked up a license for Toad for Oracle, will get the free use of TDA. So we've recognized that customers have made investments in our Toad for Oracle product. We want to give them the benefit of having a cross-platform query tool. But more specifically, you can definitely evaluate this for anywhere from up to a month, and this will allow you to test and try that solution in the environments of your choice and make an evaluation out of it. Let's move on to Rudy's question. Is there a tool within the software that can help reconcile discrepancies when linking objects? So an example, if customer ID in one database has a 2-character prefix, but the main customer ID is an 8-digit numeric value. Let me see here. Reconcile discrepancies when linking objects. What it will do, in my understanding, because we've seen this situation happen a lot with dates, right? Depending on which way you go, which way you're joining, it will decide on how to do that data conversion. So there's an automatic conversion built into the query when you're using the Visual Query Builder. So it should handle most discrepancies when doing joins across objects. For instance, you may have a date, but then you may have a varchar in the other, but the date's in the varchar field. So you can definitely use the query builder. You don't have to really manually do anything. It just automatically recognizes that and tries to make an adjustment. For most common data types, we have some support for that. There will be some that we may not have, and we could always identify those as program opportunities. But another approach is when you're doing data comparison. And if you have a date field in one that's varchar type and you have a date field in the other that's date, the data compare tool actually allows you to synchronize those values if it's needed. So that allows you to go back and decide, okay, do you want the date converted to character, or do you want the character converted to date? And it will make that conversion in the update statement for you. So I hope that answers your question, Rudy. Vishal asks, is there any need to get the queries reviewed by the DBA, or these queries are always optimized to the max? Vishal, although the query will be functional, it may not be of the best performance. So a tuning effort may be required depending on its execution plan. So TDA will not guarantee that the query is optimized to its max because there are several different concerns, right? You have CPU reduction, you have memory consumption, you have disk consumption, you have response time. So just right off the bat, there are 5 different objectives or 4 different objectives you can go off of. So it all depends on what your use case is. So we actually have a tuning product that you could use in association with TDA. It's not bundled with TDA, but you can use in association with TDA, and that will help you, get some alternative rewrites generated for you, which may provide you with the best performance for CPU reduction or the best performance for I/O reduction. But when you're using the Visual Query Builder, it's providing you with functionality to get you the right result set. Its concern is not so much performance. That is a next step in the Quest Solutions arsenal. But you do have the execution plan, and that's where the DBA perhaps can help you with optimizing those queries if you're only using TDA. How does the cross-platform query work with large data sets? For instance, 100K or perhaps even 1 million. What it will do actually is move the data locally. So yeah, there could be a concern when you're working with that data set because it's actually going to cache that data locally. As far as anything outside of that, I haven't seen any concerns. The only concerns with queries with terms of large data sets is moving to Excel. Excel 2003, I believe, has a 65K row limit in each worksheet. So if you have 66,000 records you're exporting from a cross-platform or any generic query, that 66,000th record will now appear in a second worksheet. So it will build the first 65,000 and overflow to the next. If you're working with Excel 2007 and higher, you have a 1 million record support for every worksheet. And then it will then start overflowing the 1 millionth and 1th record and above into a next worksheet. Christopher Adams asked, what would you describe as the main differences between a tool like Toad for Data Analyst and perhaps Business Objects? I would say it's the metadata. TDA, Toad for Data Analyst, is a query and reporting tool. It's a workflow tool for helping you become more efficient across your querying and data-driven project. What it doesn't have is an analytics engine. So what Business Objects, what Cognos, what SAS, a lot of these business intelligence solutions have is what's called a universe. So you can think of all these different data sources, right? You have flat files, you have Excel spreadsheets, you have actual databases and tables within them. You may have mainframes. All of this data is then registered into a metadata layer, or what's commonly called the universe, which feeds into Business Objects. So depending on the package solution, there may be an N number or a Z number of different types of metadata available to the business. So that's all packaged depending on the data sources that you have. That's the difference between TDA and Business Objects. TDA goes directly to those sources and doesn't require a metadata layer, so to speak. It's bypassing that to give you direct access to come up with your own queries, to come up with your own reports, to come up with your own ad hoc type of decision-making data-driven projects. So I guess the big difference is that TDA does not contain a metadata layer that summarizes all the data in an environment in a packaged way. It's allowing you that direct access to those sources. But I would say, where is it common? It has a reporting engine. It allows you to design reports. It allows you to automate the distribution of data. And I would say that its query building functionality is much more superior. I think a lot of folks will come to TDA and use it as an augment for Business Objects, specifically in the area of SQL development, heterogeneous queries, and data compare. Paul Smith asks, when doing an automation task, I do not find a good example to follow for these type of tasks I want to accomplish. Is there something I can go to? Let me read this again. So when doing an automation task, I do not find a good example to follow for type of tasks I want to. Oh, I see. So what you want are some samples out there that you could use as a pattern that may be close to what you're trying to perform. Let me see what I can publish. It's something I can't answer today, but what I would say is this. We actually have a communities page, so I'm going to move away from the question and answers pane 1 second. Give me 1 second while I do this. Let me escape out of this. And let me take you guys into the community for TDA. Give me 1 second. So you see here we have a site called toadworld.com. So just like Modern Analyst, Quest has produced its own portal to deliver a lot of good content for this type of community of users. And as you can see here, we have a community here specifically for TDA. So I would recommend that you go to this, perhaps start a discussion, or you could take a look at some of the associative files here to see if it perhaps gives you some insights. I don't know if we're really archiving the actual automation scripts that our customers are using, or if we've even come up with a few sample ones. So that's something I'll have to take as an action item. But in the meantime, I can point you to this community. Let me reopen that slide again and go back to our Q&A panel. Moving down the line here. So we've got about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to try to push to as many of these as I can. Thank you, Martin. Just commented on the presentation. Akila Rao asked, how does the data collection work across platforms? In my case, I'm constantly pulling data from our CRM system and from our email marketing system and then merging it manually. Well, how does it work across platforms? It's pretty straightforward. If you're working with a single platform like Oracle or just SQL Server, it will use native connectivity and it will just run the SQL natively. But if you're working across platforms, it will actually construct the query a little bit differently. Let me go back into the actual image here for a second. I think I still have that query open. So you'll see here, if I go to the actual query itself, you'll notice that the query looks a little bit different than what you may have developed natively against any one of these databases. So if we're doing a cross-platform query, we will revert to ODBC on both sides. Even though we have native support for Oracle, we will still go to ODBC. So that's how the data collection works. That's actually how the data is queried out. And as I mentioned earlier, it's then cached here locally. So perhaps if you want to export from it, or perhaps you want to build a report from it, it's a little bit more efficient that way. So I hope that answered your question. Let me go back and move to our slide and open up the Q&A panel. Is IBM DB2 supported? Absolutely. We support the UDB or LUW versions of DB2. So that would be anywhere from like 8.1 up to 9.7, for instance. Those are the databases that I've been working with recently on DB2, LUW. How does TDA, Toad for Data Analyst, compare with data analyst tools like SAS or SPSS? I think I answered that earlier. It's mainly the TDA goes directly against those sources, while solutions like SAS, business intelligence solutions, will have a metadata layer prepared based on all the underpinnings in your environment. So that's the main difference between the tool. I would also say that a lot of users like to use TDA because of the more robust query building features that they have and the data compare features. So you might find people moving from SAS into Toad or Toad for Data Analyst to develop their query and then move right back into SAS. So we're seeing that a lot these days. Sharon Rhodes asked, can the software be hooked into an application as a reporting tool, or is it only available as a standalone? I would say this, technically speaking, it cannot be hooked into a reporting tool, but that's being a little too rigid. You could always take the queries you've developed in TDA and have those embedded into the reporting tool of your choice. So there could be some complementary functionality between the two. I won't say that there's any bells and whistles or hooks inside of TDA that directly integrate, but a lot of the artifacts you're building from TDA can be embedded within other type of applications, namely the SQL that you're building. Henry asks, how is Toad licensed? Toad is licensed per seat or per the machine you install on. So an example is that if you have a laptop, a single laptop, you are purchasing a single seat of Toad for Data Analyst for that laptop. That's how it works. Unfortunately, in our organization, we have to go through IT to obtain any data. Okay, so I think Jamel was basically just kind of reiterating one of his points, or the challenges that we just outlined in our presentation. So it sounds like you won't be able to use this solution, Jamel. But again, who knows? Down the road, there may be something that IT can't answer, and maybe you can talk about the benefit that TDA may provide you given you have access to a database, of course. Pablo Lopez asks, what about connections to something weird like Matrix 1? Pablo, never heard of Matrix 1, but I know of a lot of databases like that. My thinking is, as long as Matrix 1 supports ODBC Spec 3 or ODBC version 3 of its driver, you can connect and you should be able to use TDA. So have a look at what ODBC driver Matrix 1 has support for, and if it's version 3 or Spec 3 and higher, you should be good to go in creating an ODBC connection to that database. How time intensive is it to, let me repeat, Debbie Chatley asks, how time intensive is it to initially set up a process to create the links to various databases? I would say it's a matter of minutes. The real time-consuming task in that is developing your connections to those disparate sources. Once you've defined those connections, you have a database explorer that's available to you, and you can begin dragging and dropping those into a query screen, and then you begin deciding on which join or link you want to create. So I would say more of your time is spending on what connection to create as opposed to actually defining that connection or that join. Whoops, sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened there. Oh, there we are. We're still in there. Bernard Warren asks, I'm just taking a look at time. We got a couple minutes left. How can you best deal with conceptual data model management that concerns effective meaning of the info? Does Toad make it possible to do so? I would say this. The ER diagramming kind of bleeds into that. But if you want a more of a logical or a conceptual representation of your data, that means you want to see the data model, but you don't want it to be a physical model. So you want to see entities, you want to see relationships, you don't necessarily want to see tables and the constraints. I would say that we have another solution called Toad Data Modeler, which helps to reverse engineer existing physical databases and then convert them into logical models. Or you can start from scratch, build a logical model by just showing how entities relate to each other. Do they have one-to-many relationships or not? Do they have inheritance? And then you can build the physical model that you like. Do you want this logical model to be an Oracle database down the road? Do you want it to be a SQL Server database down the road? So that type of logical modeling or conceptual diagramming is only available in Toad Data Modeler. Toad for Data Analyst reverse engineers existing structures to show you a ER diagram of physical tables, which is a little bit different. Is there any means of getting dependency information for a stored procedure in TDA and then export these dependencies along with the stored procedure? Let me quickly check for you. I don't believe so, but I could be wrong because that's something normally you would find in Toad for Oracle. But I have a database with procedures. So let's go in here and open up our Database Explorer. I'm trying to be mindful of the time. Got 2 minutes left. Here's our Navigation Manager. Let's scroll down here and click into Oracle. Let's take a look at our procedures. Functions, rather. I have more functions in the database. There we are. Let's highlight one function. And let's take a look at the detail here on the right. You know, unfortunately, it does not query out the dependencies. So, for instance, if this was being used if this was using a certain list of tables, or if it was being called by another procedure in the database, it will not show that. So that's something that you would have to actually go into Toad for Oracle or our more full-feature development and DBA tools. Again, TDA is mainly for the analyst. So, unfortunately not. We don't support that particular question, Daphne. And I have time. I'm going to answer just 2 more questions here, and then we'll conclude. Ivy asks, can you include databases that you access through a remote connection? That's something I would say no, because you're going to have to develop that connection within TDA. I would have to know a little bit more about the remote connection, so maybe you can email me offline regarding that connection, and I can take a look at perhaps a workaround. And then the last question I'm going to answer here, I'm sorry guys, I try to get to most of them, but Alicia asks, how much time do you need to train business analysts so that he or she is comfortable using all the features you've just shown us? I would say that one of my employees this Thursday is taking a 6-hour course on TDA. That would be probably the most time you need to spend. That's a professional service offering that they've paid for. I would say that for what you've learned today, it's just a matter of hours. It's probably maybe 1 or 2 hours at the most getting comfortable with those features. And again, you have the community, so you could review these tutorials. I didn't mention that, but the community has a bunch of prepackaged Flash tutorials that you could access to kind of learn some of the features within the solution. So that's about it from my side. I want to thank you all again for your time and attention. I hope this was an informative session, and I'm going to hand this right back over to Adrian for a final comment.
Great. Thank you, Amit, and thank you, everyone, for attending this Modern Analyst webinar. And many thanks again to Amit and Quest Software for a very informative presentation. I wanted to point out that a webinar, along with the slides, will be archived at ModernAnalyst.com within a few days, so you can access, again, the information from there, or if you want to share with a colleague. This concludes today's event. Thank you again, and we hope you have a great day.